Before we started, we thought it was a good idea to situate ourselves before we read, and I'm come from a women's studies background rather than a political background, and I work with women who are victims of violence, so that informs the way I think about the chapter and the way I think about the things that we're learning, and that will also start working within you. You will now have assumptions about the way I think and the way I perceive, and kind of on it goes. Did you want to situate something? You don't? Okay. The thesis, what I perceived as the thesis of the chapter, was feminists are concerned with power and its effects, and the most important question in a feminist research ethic is how can we study power and mitigate its abuse in the real world when we as researchers also participate in the powerful projection of knowledge in the world. This research ethic is therefore a questioning practice, an inquiry into how we inquire, and makes questions about the practice of research central, in particular the power of epistemology at work through boundaries, relationships, and our situatedness.
And it also offers researchers feminist standards for assisting research despite feminism multiplicity, and it also can help the researcher resolve ethical dilemmas in research in ways that enhance the quality of the research. This ethic requires not only attentiveness to the power of epistemology, but also requires attentiveness to many kinds of boundaries, and attentiveness to relationship, and attentiveness to situatedness. And what is the underlying assumption? A feminist research ethic can be used to explore a full range of political and social science questions informed by a full range of theoretical and empirical theories and difficulties. The underlying assumption of this statement is because it includes attentiveness to power, boundaries, relationship, and the researcher's situatedness, and self-reflection about the research process, and also expectation on ongoing concern about boundaries, silencing, absences, and marginalization.
Self-reflection that Anita mentioned, I looked at that as central to the underlying assumption, because researchers are engaged in the production of knowledge, and there is no gender-neutral or power-neutral research methodology or epistemology. Knowledge is power and is constructed by power relations. And research epistemology, as knowledge, constructs rather than merely describes a self-evident or essential world, and has the power to construct the very boundaries, silences and gaps that the feminist researcher may take as their subject of study. And the two pieces of evidence we looked at was the examples of attentiveness to power relations, which was Ella Baker and Acosta. In studying the Bronx slave mart, Ella Baker crossed the boundaries of researcher research to experience their working conditions and to undermine and interrogate forms of inclusion and exclusion. Because she went in to work there were things that they might not have told her or been afraid to tell her, or wouldn't have told her because she wasn't part of their group, and it enabled her to gain information about the power dynamics and norms of the subject participants and their working conditions she would never have otherwise had access to.
And Acosta set out to study rape as a war crime during partition of India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. Self-reflection and attentiveness to power relations led her to change the subject of her inquiry to the gender silences within the history of nation building. This bringing of the margin to the center yielded new and valuable insight. So what is the political implication of this assumption and arguments? Political arena is dynamic. So being attentive and self-reflective are imperative for a sound research in political science.
These ideas have implications for all researchers, as such an ethic attempts to make visible the power of research epistemology to structure what we know. While norms rely on and depend on exclusions, a feminist research ethic seeks to create a new norm of self-reflection that makes visible and challenges exclusions and power dynamics within the research process and the production of knowledge. By so doing, she or he disturbs and destabilises epistemology and the production of gendered norms that replicate international relations as they are, this is a really long sentence, and that exclude women others as subjects and actors in the field of international relations.
Feminist research ethic, this is the counter-argument. Feminist research ethic is required for exploratory research and problem-solving research, but it seems less essential as an ethic for testing out research because Some may argue because it does not specify its theoretical hypotheses in ways that are testable and falsifiable with evidence. So, if you want to do a PhD with an expectation to be totally original in your research, or if you want to do a postdoc, then you should consider feminist research ethic. But if you decide to postpone the pleasure of attempting to be totally original until after your PhD has been obtained, or in other words, if you want to finish very quick, a test-out research is better. Thus, feminist research ethic is important, even though important, but not necessarily crucial.
Self-reflection, and this is where we had a different reading of the chapter. Self-reflection would be considered crucial. Self-reflection and situatedness are necessary but have limitations. Like from my position, a white Western woman, I can't stand outside Western structures of knowing. And while there is no substitute for a critique from other cultural positions, so if I write a paper to have someone else read it and talk about what exclusions and marginalisation silences are operating in what I've written, they're probably going to be positioned still within Western discourse, such as other academics or students. As in the case study that was last week and now 2 weeks ago of the burqa ban, Western ideas of the meaning of freedom and oppression are privileged and still shape laws, including international laws that subject everyone. So again, it's like self-reflection is essential, but is always going to be limited. Western representations of the other far outweigh any competing discourse. There's very limited right or process of reply for the subject participant, and there is no body of knowledge that critiques the West in particular from these excluded silence positions. Women wearing burqas or veils are not going to turn up here to research the oppression of Western women and their subjection to the male gaze.